What's up, world? I'm Matt Newberg from Hungry, and this is The Feed. Each episode, we'll dive into conversations with the industry insiders who are leveraging technology to shape the way we eat. On today's episode of The Feed, I sat down with Stefan Hertzberg, SVP of Growth at ItsaCheckmate, an integrator between POS systems and online ordering channels for QSRs like Wendy's, Five Guys, and Jet's Pizza. In this episode, we'll talk about the recent M&A activity in the fragmented restaurant tech space, how operators can own their customer data on third-party delivery platforms, and the challenges facing many startups in this space. All right, Stefan, it's awesome to have you here. Thank you so much for coming down to the east side here. We're in Hollywood, Los Angeles, IRL at the Hungry Studios. So I'd love for you to just talk about your background. I'd love for you to talk about your background and, talk about how you got into ItsaCheckmate.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It's lively around here. Cool place to be. So thanks for having me in person, and glad we're able to do this. Keep it short. I mean, multi-generational involvement in the restaurant industry. Worked in the restaurant industry myself growing up. From a pizza boy to bus boy, and paid my way through college working in restaurants. And so, obviously, when you grow up like that, I think the idea of working in finance and the Wall Street career path looks really appealing at a young age. And so, dipped my toe into the finance world out of school for probably 5 or 6 years, and had a lot of fun and learned a lot. But ultimately, it was kind of getting back into doing my own thing and not moving numbers around for the sake of doing so. Came across a pretty interesting opportunity. I'd met our founder, Vishal, who was just getting going. I think, when I joined, we had just a few hundred locations in total using our product, and really only in the heart of New York City. Think of kind of the highest volume, Naya Expresses, Dig-Ins, restaurants like that, super high volume restaurants that were using the product. And so it was a really small concept, and I had joined early on as just kind of try to help with anything that I could. So whether that's the janitor some days, and other days you're setting up Salesforce and doing reporting, and other days you're knocking on doors and making sales calls. So it's been a fun 5-year journey here, and really exciting time to join the food tech industry when I did. And it's been, has lots of ups and certainly downs as well. And I think we're seeing more of the downside here, and a lot of the misbehavior that's happened over the past few years start to come about.
Yeah, totally. I feel that roller coaster as well. What was the pizzeria you worked at growing up?
Yeah, it was actually a close friend of mine. He owned a place called Joey's Pizza, and so they were opening a new location, and he was like, you and my son should open it. And so we did everything from prepping the dough, making the pizzas, making the salads, ringing people up. Awesome. That was on, I believe, an NCR Aloha machine, which was kind of my first foray into seeing what the tech stack can and can't do for your restaurant. So that was really fun, but long time ago now that we're talking about it.
It's funny, I saw that news about Aloha getting hacked the other week, and that was just like, come on guys, get it together.
Yeah, I think it's easy to have them as a scapegoat, right? They everybody loves to talk about their POS being old and antiquated, and I think they did a really good job with the silver product that's cloud-based. And if we're being intellectually honest here, I think just about every company in the world is open to some sort of attack like this. And so it's like, do you pay ransom or not pay ransom? That's kind of more of like a fundamental issue, but it's easy for them to get dragged through the mud. But I would imagine that most of the large publicly traded companies are just as susceptible to something like this.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, I'd love for you to just give us a quick overview of what ItsaCheckmate does, and kind of the brands you work with, and kind of the value prop.
Yeah, sure. So keep it nice and quick. We started off as kind of a POS integration company, and what that means is you walk into a restaurant and you see the 5 or 6 tablets on the counter. You have the aha moment that this probably won't exist a few years from now, and so we became the solution for that. And so whether brands are accepting orders from Uber Eats or DoorDash, it was seamless in New York City where we started. Grubhub, Postmates, all of that, and some have kind of disappeared as brands, some still remain. But consolidating all of that and streamlining it directly into the restaurant's point of sale was kind of the core vision of the company, was to streamline operations for restaurant operators. From there, we've expanded into an accounting reconciliation product. The way to think about that is, the number that's in your Uber Eats account, the number that's in your POS, and the number that shows up in your bank is very different. And so we're talking about some restaurants, 40, 60, 70% of gross transactions are going through third parties now. And so it's a really big piece of your business to be missing 5% of it without really understanding why or how. And so that was our second product. And we just recently closed an acquisition of Open Tender, and we can get into that a little bit later. But that's a core first party ordering solution for the enterprise, for enterprise restaurant groups. And so that's kind of the basics of what we do. Some of our customers, all of these are at the corporate level, so I'm not mentioning any brands that we just kind of pick off one or two franchisees, which is a common thread in the industry. People love putting like Chipotle's brand name on their website, and they don't work with Chipotle. So some of the Checkmate core customers, Wendy's, Arby's, Buffalo Wild Wings, Sonic, Five Guys, White Castle, and then we've got a bunch of your local heroes, right? So it's an SMB and an enterprise business. Started off as SMB, moved upstream to enterprise, but rolled out 6,500 Wendy's last year in about 60 days. So really robust and kind of two different arms of our business, but in general, we serve the Momofukus of the world at the same time, right? So find those kind of 1 to 3 location mom and pops in each city.
Got it. And every franchisee has to use you.
No, and I think that's a healthy decision to not push that.
Got it. Okay.
If you're in the business of selling franchises, you want to make friends, not enemies. And so there's nothing worse than telling a business in the middle of Iowa that you must use an integration product, and maybe they do 3 orders from Grubhub a day. Our fee probably doesn't make sense. And so we always like to do best practices, host webinars, lead with data, put together case studies of, hey, here's how we did it with 500 corporate stores. Here's the numbers. If they're interesting to you, here's how you sign up. If it's not, we'll continue to fight. So it's never really a mandated process.
That's good. And then as far as like the use cases, we just talked about franchises, but like I'm also aware of, virtual brands being a huge use case, ghost kitchens. Like if you could talk about kind of some of the nuances and like how people are using you and why they need to go through a process or through a vendor like ItsaCheckmate versus just like directly through their POS system. What are some of the complexities there?
Yeah. So I guess 2 parts to that question. The first one is why it really comes back to centralization, I think, and the menu management piece. And so if you have your menu in, let's just say 6 different digital areas, whether it be your online ordering system, whether it be Uber Eats and DoorDash, catering platforms, stuff like that. And so centralized menu management is really kind of the core of what we're solving. The POS has very much been regarded as the on-premise source of truth forever, and I think that's a very accurate thing still today. But when you start to look at what happens when 50% of your revenue or 30% of your revenue is coming from off-premise, where do those menus exist? Where is that source of truth?
Yeah.
And so that's why a company like Checkmate and lots of other people that do similar things in our industry, that's really the crux of why I think it's super important. And what we're doing is kind of foundational in the sense, because we can continue to build on top of it. But at the end of the day, there's a single point of management for your menu. So if you have to 86 fries on a Friday night in the middle of a rush, hopefully you don't have to. But if you do, you go to a single place, you mark it sold out. A lot of the times we're pulling that directly from your point of sale. So you can just mark it out of stock in your point of sale. And that'll then publish to your Uber, DoorDash, Grubhub, Postmates menus, your online ordering menu. Maybe you're available to order in some other exotic places. So that's kind of the single stop shop menu management layer, I think is super important. To your second question, I think it's a great question. Plenty of investors and people in the industry are wondering, well, why don't restaurants just do this directly from their point of sale? Companies like Toast have direct integrations, Square, Revel. I mean, you can go down the list. Everybody has them. Today, Toast is probably the most robust direct POS integration offering. They have DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub, and now Chow Now. So we've certainly seen competitive streaks there. We've certainly had churn from them to us. They've definitely seen churn from us to them. And I think that battle will continue, but I would say it's a very healthy battle. We're super engaged with their team, and I almost liken it to, think of like what Microsoft does. They'll build a product or put a product through the Microsoft powerhouse that's maybe 60 or 70% as good as like a Zoom.
Right.
Think Microsoft Teams. Sorry for everybody that has to log into those meetings. I'm permanently late. But, there's a Slack that exists for a reason. And it has a pretty sizable market cap and a really sizable customer base. But it'll always get competed away because it's in the Microsoft ecosystem. And so if you can build a product that's 60, 70% as good as what we have, and I think Toast has probably done something in that neighborhood, then that's great. They're serving a really large portion of their customer base with an excellent product that is cheaper than ours, candidly. And so I think that's a healthy mix to have in this space. And we'll continue to see more of it, but there is identifying those use cases and finding that gap of that 40 to 50% VIG where, hey, there is massive opportunity for us here, and we can continue to work with their mid-market teams and their enterprise teams. And so we have a really constructive and healthy dialogue with all of them. And I love everything that's happening in industry. I think actually it's rising tide, all boats scenario here with Toast in particular.
So if people just need a little bit extra customization, they're going to go with you. It's like more, it's just a different layer of depth, I guess.
Yeah, let's go specific. So if you have multiple menus, this is probably going to shoot me in the foot. Someone from Toast will listen to this and be like, hey, we're going to actually build support for all of these features. So if I lose money, I'm charging it to the podcast.
Yes.
But that means someone from Toast will be listening, which is good, I think, right?
Toast needs to sponsor this podcast. We should tell them.
So we'll say positive things for now. Like if you have multiple menus, Toast doesn't support it through the direct integration. Another one, and another topic we'll get to in a little bit, but is like super relevant and no one in the industry is talking about, is how to manage the customer data. And so if you want to do self-delivery yourself, and self-delivery does not mean that you have to actually have drivers yourself.
Right.
There's plenty of providers that can do the delivery for you. But if you tell Uber or DoorDash that you want them to be just a demand gen channel and you want to do the delivery yourself, whether that's in-house or through another partner, I guess a fourth party in this scenario, the Toast integration doesn't support that. If you have a ghost kitchens or virtual brands, their integration doesn't support that.
Right.
Inflated pricing as well, which is another hot topic I'm sure we'll dig into, right? And so that's a fun one. Let's jump in there too. But so those are like four off the top of my mind with Toast in particular, and then also at the same layer, any brands like 20, 30 locations and higher that Toast is selling, which they have a massive mid-market and enterprise movement happening. There's a lot of groundswell there, and it's a fantastic product. I own a few restaurants myself, and we use Toast in all of them, and it's just it's a really great product, incredible APIs, and uptime, which is obviously super important as well. So it's a good partnership, and we encourage continued growth of their own product in addition to our partnerships. And I would say that's kind of been our stance, and hasn't really hurt our business too much over the course of the past 2 years. That I think, the back of envelope math that an investor would say is, oh, Toast is bigger than you guys. They're rolling out a product that's the same as you. And so my spreadsheet spits out that you guys are going to be in trouble. And the reality is that math doesn't really work and has not worked. So
depth versus breadth. I feel like this idea of unified commerce, it'll serve like whatever the majority of use cases are, but for the QSRs and the larger delivery players, they're going to need something a little bit more advanced and robust, it sounds like.
They're an amazing POS company.
Right.
We do integrations 24/7, 365 in 18 countries for 25,000 locations. So when Uber Eats is on or off, we're the first people to know about it, right? And so think about it that way, I would say.
Absolutely. So you recently acquired a company called OpenTender. Love to hear about that. And then we've also seen similar moves from your competitors. Chally bought Koala, and then DeliverEct recently bought a company called ChatFood, which I think has somewhat similar functionality. So I guess let's talk about the acquisition, and then then we can move back a little bit broader and step back and say, why is this happening?
Yeah, sure. Great question. Very timely. I think the DeliverEct news was last week, so excited to dig in. So what is OpenTender? I think it's the best. To take a step back and think about Checkmate, we felt that in order to truly go after and disrupt the enterprise space, we needed to have the badges of honor on our chest. We needed to have the brands. We needed to have the we needed to be acknowledged in the industry as a real and relevant player. And so we've been thinking about doing this for a long time, and we pressed pause on it because we didn't have maybe the brands. And Inspire Brands investing in Checkmate was a healthy step in the right direction. But I really think that things came to fruition last year when we had launched Wendy's. We signed and launched about 6,500 Wendy's locations in roughly 90 days. And I think that was validation that nobody in this space could do something like that. Hands down, cut clear, not possible, never seen it done. Anyone else has not done this. And so it was like, okay, this is a testament to our operations and our team being able to support brands, but then also for brands being able to feel supported as well. And so then the conversation began, hey, we should now go into first party. We have enough logos. We have the right size of our company, and we feel that we can really compete with Olo. And this is, again, the leader in the industry, an 18-year-old company. I think Noah said this week or last week was their 18-year anniversary. So amazing what they have done. Really crazy. And he's been on the forefront of all things positive in this industry, and really kind of the visionary that is the reason I probably have a job that I have today. So nothing there, but nothing more exciting than being able to be the disruptor. And so now that we had the logos, now that we had the confidence in our team and what we're building here, it was time to then take a step up and figure out how to kind of solve for the ordering and dispatch piece, because we had the Rails piece, which is Olo's product that we competed with for the last 4 years. And now let's solve the other two main pieces, which was ordering and dispatch. And so we acquired OpenTender. We spent about 6 months vetting multiple companies in the industry, trying to find out who had the best technology. And turns out it was right under our nose, a little company that had started working with some restaurant brands in New York City as Brandable. They kind of rebranded to OpenTender.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And so really incredible product. I would recommend everybody just goes on the website and checks it out themselves. It's fascinating, and I'm excited to see what we can do. I really think that, the product's going to start getting sold in June, and it's going to be exciting to see what happens. There's going to be a lot of positive movement for restaurant owners in this industry, because now there is a truly number two competitor that I think will either offer a ton of variety and optionality, but also push Olo in a positive direction. And I liken it to kind of, I'm a big golfer, but PGA Tour and Live, and I don't want to say that we're Live, but the second comer of something really interesting. So
how many? So you have 25,000 doors. That includes the OpenTender customers, or does that?
Yeah, roughly 25,000 all in. We acquired a company with very incredibly technically sound and amazing UI UX, but not a lot of customers. They were hyper focused on the product for a really long time. And so we got really lucky to be able to say, hey, let's join forces. And like I said, excited to see what we can do there.
Yeah, I know they were working with Dig-In. That's how I recognize it. If you think about like why we're seeing this happen and what else we're going to see consolidate here. Now let's turn back to the realities of where we are today in this crazy, evolution of food delivery. Like why are we seeing everyone make these moves, and like what's to come?
Yeah, putting my impartial hat on, Checkmate aside, why do I think all this is happening? The Chowly deal is fascinating to me. Koala is a primarily enterprise company. For those that aren't aware of kind of like where Koala sits, the easy way to think about it, and Matt, you might have some more info there, but like a lot of Olo customers don't actually use Olo's interface. Right. So they go to Olo and they say, we want your first party ordering experience. But in fact, it's actually not good enough. We want to use a Koala. We want to use a Bounteous Hathaway. We want to use There's a few other companies.
These are white label first party.
Plain Air is another one, PLEIN. Yep. And so there's a lot of companies that sit on top of Olo's stack. So Olo says that they're an online ordering company, but then there's actually another layer that sits on top of it where you have to pay a lot of money to get like a custom UI UX built that resolves to your brand, because Olo is very highly templated. Sure. And so that's the opportunity we felt we could disrupt. You're essentially hiring two companies when you go with Olo, if you're a brand that really is like super forward thinking about your branding. And so we didn't need to do that. And so why did they do that? Well, the Chowly deal was interesting because Koala is primarily Olo. And so that's from my understanding, a majority of Koala's business is on Olo. And so now Chowly has a competitive product to Olo Rails, and they acquired a company in Koala that most of their revenue is coming from Olo. And so how does that actually pan out? TBD. But from what I understand, the Chowly acquisition was to focus on SMB and mid-market customers. They've pretty much gotten out of the enterprise space. We certainly don't see them in deals too often anymore. I think they let some team members go in the enterprise space as well. And so I think they're really hyper-focused on SMB and mid-market. And I think that's it's a good strategy. And the Koala product is really solid. And that team that they've built is what I would say exceptional. So it'll be fun to watch that, but that's not a competitive deal to us because they're focused. Our open tender and Checkmate, I think, is primarily going to be 25 plus location brands and probably mostly bigger than that. So it's a pure enterprise play. On the DeliverX news, so their CEO moved to New York recently. Zong. And I've never met him, but heard great things. I think
on the podcast.
He's been on the podcast. And I've heard great things. I think they've done a really outstanding job building their business, and they're trying to get into the US aggressively. And so they've raised a lot of capital. And I think, the first tranche was to get into the US is what the press release read. That didn't really have much traction. And now this last big tranche was to get into the US, and I don't think they had a ton of traction. So it's a smart acquisition. It's, from what I understand, an international business that they acquired. It'll help them. It'll help them be present in the Middle East, I believe. A lot of the Gulf regions, chat food is pretty popular, but they'll take that tech and I'm sure try to upsell it into their existing customer base. So it's strategically a smart move. Again, we don't really see DeliverX in the enterprise space much at all. It's more of an SMB and mid-market play. I'm not sure their largest customer in terms of corporate. But I do know they're in more countries than us, and they kind of started over there and are coming here. So it's an exciting time. Yeah.
So where do you think, let's look at the broader trends here. Food delivery is obviously, it's growing, but it's slowing. We've had a lot of earnings calls recently where large CPGs are talking about not a decline, but just a slow in growth. And obviously we have a lot of these companies that I think we're familiar with are probably nearing the end of their runway. So what can you say about the current state of the food tech industry or restaurant tech specifically, and where else might we see more of this kind of consolidation and opportunities for larger players to gobble up some of these startups?
So two-part question. Let me take the first one. What do I think happens in restaurant technology, companies like ourselves and others? We have raised a very small amount of capital in our 6 years as a business, and that's been very intentional. Even when investors and potential investors and everybody in the industry was saying, Alex is raising $120 million from SoftBank, and you've got DeliverX, I think, has raised over $100 million, and all of our competitors, right? And so why are you not pouring gas on the fire right now? And it was never exciting to us. What are we going to do with that money?
Launch virtual brands?
Launch virtual brands, what are you doing in crypto? What's your Web3 strategy? And we'll talk about artificial intelligence later on, and I think that's a really meaningful one. I don't want to ever lump that in the same category as Web3 or crypto, but In general, I would say it's a really troubled environment. And the one thing that bothers me the most about all of these layoffs that happened is employees are never going to see what would have happened to their shares. And most of them are underwater. And so there needs to be a lot more transparency in this industry, and there needs to be a lot more questions from potential employees about, you've raised X amount of dollars. What does that actually mean? I mean, there's companies that raised $100 million Series A rounds with less than $1 million in revenue, less than $500,000 in revenue. And so a lot of employees and people in our industry think that it's a positive that your company's raised a lot of money.
No.
And that's actually the opposite. What is your goal when you go work at a company? If you're 25 to 35 years old, you go work at a young startup, I think your idea is you're going to buy a house. You might buy, if you already own a house, you might buy your parents a house. That's your ticket, right? You're going to have a nice nest egg that's going to come out from this. You're going to work 4 to 6 years at a company. You're going to have some sort of liquidity event. And because everybody got let go, I think people are actually going to be frustrated about their shares. In reality, their shares probably would not have amounted to much.
Yep.
And that's the reality of it, because these people that raised massive slots of capital at super dilutive terms with preference stacks that were never able to be paid back upon. And I mean, there's a stat that I saw recently, I think it was like 70% of companies, 70% of publicly traded companies are trading below the value of the cash that they raised when they were private.
Just across the entire
I think
market.
It's the SaaS industry. And so you start to think about, like, what are you actually doing there? Why are you grinding away because they have a keg in the office or because they do cool team retreats or whatever, right? People watch the WeWork movie and all that stuff and laugh, but in reality, a lot of people are drinking that same Kool-Aid when they go to work every day. Sure. And so there's a lot of don't practice what you preach happening. There's a lot of, we raised this amount of money, let's pound on our chest. And so, we've very much been in kind of like a quiet mode for the last 4 years. We've just started getting into the marketing space, but it's just been like build with your head down mentality. And it doesn't mean that it's the right way. Perhaps our equity value is worth a lot more or something like that, but we have been a net hirer during the last 18 months. And that makes me really proud to say, because without building our business the way we would have built it, we would have had to let go of a lot of our team members. Yeah. And these people are fundamental in the way we built the business. And so I think it's a really difficult time. Where do we go from here? We probably see private equity step in and take some companies private. I wouldn't be surprised if Olo is a top candidate for that.
Grubhub also potentially.
Yeah, Grubhub, who knows? That seems like it's a bit hairy. Because this is like the 4th transaction in 18 months or something. It feels like,
who wants this
hot potato, exactly. So we'll see. That said, I mean, Grubhub still provides a lot of meaningful value to a lot of brands. So I think there is a real asset there. I'd be surprised if Toast doesn't try to take a bid at them.
Oh, that'd be great.
But you have to, in my opinion, see further consolidation happen. And you can buy a ton of these interesting technology startups that have overraised and underpromised at a massive discount. But I mean, you look at publicly traded companies that are in the restaurant tech space that are trading for under $1 billion in market cap. And then you've got like Toast, which is down 70%, and it's still trading at like 10 billion plus. So they're the one to watch out for. I think they have some really interesting moves in the next 18 months. Their growth is going to slow, recession, headline risk, all of that stuff. And so what are they going to do? They're going to, classic public market strategy. They're going to buy their growth and beat their numbers. Yeah. And again, this is not advice on stocks or anything whatsoever. DYR. This is just like me speculating about what I think. Sure. I don't trade anything in this industry, never have. It's not worth it. But more just like, I would imagine that they start to buy up some interesting companies, and that's going to be good for the ecosystem. And then you'll see private equity step in and either force people private or consolidate, because they have the cash on their sheets and they have the horizon that a lot of companies don't have today.
Very fascinating outlook. Thank you for that perspective. I think it's
pretty really dark.
I mean, look, everything goes through cycles, every industry, and obviously the broader tech landscape is not like shielded from this. It's boom and bust. And I don't know, I was just thinking back, like, I think Amazon went public today, 26 years ago. And that, I mean, if you invested $1,000, it'd be worth $1.5 million today in that company. Wow. And Amazon's gone through a fair bit of boom and bust cycles and has endured. Right. And so will the best tech companies in this space as well, I believe. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think that.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm very bullish on the industry. I wouldn't be spending 100% of my time doing it. I think there's just been a lot of bad behavior over the last 24 months in particular. And I think, unfortunately, the thing I care about the most is the employees that are going to get washed out or have gotten washed out. And so, you know, I would just encourage anyone and everyone in the industry that does happen to listen to this or is thinking about moving jobs or recently got laid off and is in the middle of hiring, go follow like someone from Carta on LinkedIn. There's a really amazing like data insights guy that works at Carta, and go do some reading on Substack and go find some information for yourself. Avoid New York Times and all these big publications that it's all pay to play, but go listen to Matt's podcast and go ask some real hard questions. What does your preference stack look like? How much has to be paid back to investors before we're worth anything? Why did you raise this much capital? What are you planning on doing with it? And just ask some very simple questions, but understand what the cap table looks like. Understand what you're getting into. Understand, if you can, how many shares are outstanding. It's great to say I got 25,000 shares.
But
out of
pie?
100 million or out of 10 million? What do you mean? And what do you know, it's obviously difficult for someone in my position to ever guide to what your shares are worth. That's illegal. But you should be able to have these very clear conversations with your employees or potential employees about what you're offering. It's not just about healthcare. It's not just about what days off and what holidays you get off. That's, I think, basics. You're not going to recruit any talent if you can't do that right these days. But you should really dig in, because there's a whole generation of employees that are betting their financial well-being and success in this world on outcomes that probably would have never happened regardless of what happened to their company and the layoffs that happened. And so I just think that's a really important thing that our industry doesn't talk about enough.
No, thank you. Yeah, there's a real opportunity cost for everybody, you know, me and you too. Like, you know, why did I decide not to go work at any of these companies and just interview people? Or why did you decide to bet on the, you know, how many years you've been there? It's like 5 years?
Yeah, like 5 now. Yeah, but you get to come hang out here every day. I don't, so that's pretty cool.
I'm definitely enjoying it. So let's dive into the like some of the broader trends here and talk about some stuff we've kind of, you know, we've touched on very briefly, but I'd love to dive in. So the first thing is self-delivery. Talk to us what that actually means. So I think a lot of people are familiar with at this point, you know, if I have Toast, I would just have like DoorDash Drive do the delivery and own the customer data, et cetera, right? And then you're talking about something else where I'm actually getting my customer from DoorDash, but I'm finding a cheaper courier through like Lyft or through Uber, and I'm essentially like using an open marketplace of like couriers through all these different marketplaces to just kind of do some sort of arbitrage on what I would have normally had to pay for DoorDash to just originate the customer and fulfill it, it sounds like.
Exactly right. And this, you know, people love to criticize DoorDash, people love to criticize Uber, and this was made possible because of that criticism. So I think there's a healthy amount of criticism that actually is a good thing in this world, because it elicits change. But you now, and for 2 to 3 years now, have the ability to do something called bring your own courier or bring your own driver. And so you can use Uber Eats and DoorDash as a demand gen channel.
Okay.
And so you can, just like you would do SEO on Google if you had a sock company and you were trying to generate revenue, right? You would probably be on Etsy and Amazon and advertising on Google and have your own website. And so you can just use them as demand gen.
Okay.
And then what you could do, and this is probably more realistic for multi-location brands. SMBs, it probably doesn't make much of a difference, but when you can use the economies of scale across your brand, it becomes a really interesting opportunity that we see a lot of brands do. And so what that actually looks like is you switch on, bring your own courier, and then what happens is Uber Eats and DoorDash are sharing with you the customer information. That customer information is getting shared with you because they need you to have that information so that you can deliver the food.
Absolutely.
You then can either do it yourself in-house. Let's say there's lots of companies. There's a company called Vromo, Cartwheel, Nash, First Delivery. There's lots of companies out here doing it. They basically have aggregated the last mile fleets, similar to how we have aggregated the top of funnel demand gen, like Uber Eats and DoorDash, right? So we aggregate all those orders into your POS. Right. These guys aggregate the delivery drivers, get the food picked up from the restaurant and sent out. And so it's really fascinating. We'll have our own product coming here in the back half of the year for our first party ordering solution that restaurants can do this. But basically, it allows you to generate orders from Uber and DoorDash, get them sent into your point of sale, have someone from Relay or DoorDash Drive or some other local fleet around the country come pick up that order.
It bids it in real time. Like it could be Uber. It could be Uber one day, DoorDash another day, Relay the next day.
And each of these companies have different structures. So some of them have bidding, and so you can set parameters. Right? It's fascinating. You can say, "I want the fastest delivery," and so they will basically get the order. So an order will come in from Uber Eats. It'll go to Checkmate. Checkmate will put it into your point of sale and send it to, let's say you use Vromo or Nash or Cartwheel. We'll send it to them. They then have your set of rules. And your rule was, I want the cheapest. Right. Or I want the fastest. Or I want the highest rated driver and the fastest. Or I want all deliveries to go to DoorDash Drive first. And if DoorDash can't fulfill, I want you to go to Uber Direct. Right. And if Uber Direct can't fulfill, then I want you to bid it out to the cheapest. Interesting. And so you can have these multi-tiered rules that will allow you to actually get the delivery done. And what does this mean to the restaurant? Absolutely nothing from a technology perspective. Right. You sign up with one or two vendors and we handle all of the tech and the integration for you. And so does it end up shaking out to be, if your DoorDash fee was, let's say, just used to round numbers, everyone likes to use of 30%. I think that's probably high these days, but let's just say 30%.
30% when you have the marketing included in that.
You do both. You do all of it, right? And now if you just use DoorDash as demand gen, you probably go down to 13 or 15%. I'm picking on DoorDash, but Uber Eats, Grubhub, let's just kind of think of them all the same. Although they're not. And they have their own differentiated, special features, which I do think is true. I'm laughing, but I think that is true. But let's just kind of bucket them all for the sake of simplicity. Your fee now goes from 30% to 15%, 13%. It's a big cut. And now if you can actually make delivery profitable by increasing your prices 10, 15%, and I know we'll get to price increase talks later, but you increase your prices 10, 15%, so you eat off the demand gen, and then you can fulfill the last mile profitably, and maybe even better. Maybe it's faster, maybe it's a little cheaper. I'm not sure what, depends on the preferences, and also the metro you're located in is super important here. But you can save 5-10 points of margin there, let alone on top of that, you get all the customer data. No, I can't say what you can do with that customer data. I think it's up to each business to go through their contracts with the DSPs and understand what the legal ramifications are. But you have the customer's first and last name, address, contact information. And so all these restaurants, there's been a real uplift, and I don't have access to customer data. Well, there is actually a way to do it. Now, again, what you do with it, that is not my place to say, but there is a way to understand who's ordering from your business, and there is a way to do delivery, and there is a way to make it profitable. And that's just one way to do it. But I think it's really interesting, and there's a lot of tools out there that I think aren't talked about enough. And I wish there was more topics at conferences discussing things like this, because frankly, it's kind of no one likes to talk about it because they're funded by lots of people that this would disrupt. And I think it's just, if we're all in this for the better of our local restaurants, which I think we are, or I hope that we are, then this is a good conversation to be having.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think I forget about that too. The nuances here of like owning that data. It was completely lost on me. And I was always thinking, it's a way to save margin. And then you pass on this, I'm assuming the restaurants are saving this margin because they're also passing on the fees to the customer, or at least most of it. They could subsidize it. They could, I don't know what the standard practice is these days. But I'm assuming a lot of this is passed on to the customer.
Yeah, I think that's the case.
Right.
In general, I don't know that there's any hard and fast rules here, but maybe you eat $2 to $3 on a delivery fee and you pass the rest on to a customer, whatever.
Right.
The economics vary depending on the concept.
So if you eat $2 to $3 on depends on the AOV, but what's the ultimate net what's your margin?
It's a great question. I mean, again, if I'm talking about a brand with 150 locations that's focused in the big metros, probably a really different conversation than, a 300 location brand that's in the Midwest. And so economics are dependent on everyone's business. What I would say is, if you are a restaurant owner, feel free to reach out to me, or you should be having these conversations. You should be talking with these companies and at least understanding what it makes sense for you. It maybe half the time it makes 0 sense. And you know what? The 3% that you're going to save, you could just expense out at the end of the year as a marketing cost or a cost of doing business, and it's not worth it. But we do have real brands that see real savings here. And so it's something worth exploring. And especially if you're a brand with an app or a loyalty program and you really want to lean into that a little bit, it's probably a healthy conversation.
Great stuff. Really, really good. The other thing you touched on was dynamic pricing. So DoorDash recently came out. It's a really weird turn of events from my perspective. So they said, we will penalize you as a restaurant if we see somehow that your in-store menu is one price and your DoorDash menu is inflated, to account for some of the fees that we're talking about. And that we will maintain the integrity and promote restaurants that have better price parity. I don't know where they're getting the menu data from. And then I find out that they're working with Sauce dynamic pricing to try to start to sell this dynamic pricing software to some restaurants. So I'm like, and give them a free trial. So what's going on here? I know that Uber Eats actually does do dynamic pricing, and guess what? They don't share any of the VIG with the restaurant. Okay, so they could be marking up your burger. You as the operator don't even know about it, and they're just pocketing it all as cash. What's going on here?
On the Uber Eats side, I do not know that to be true, and we do not see that from our side. And so I have some homework to do there. But we're the source of truth of the menu, and we see what comes back in and out of our system. And so I'm not sure that from our subset of restaurants, we see that behavior. DoorDash being one and Uber being, two of our largest partners when it comes to referral partners, technology partners. If they're releasing a new feature, we're in the beta or the alpha of that. So we work really closely with both of these teams and have really solid alignment across the board. And so I was surprised to see the DoorDash headline. So there's two sides to the conversation. DoorDash is a customer-obsessed company, right? And I believe that to be true. They want to make their consumers the happiest that they can by providing an exceptional experience, food, variety, all that stuff, right? And so the argument, and there was a great conversation at Food on Demand about this, and Colin from Sauce and Ashwin from Juicer and two other really thoughtful people from the industry were up there talking about this, and everybody was talking about one side of the argument, and I do think there's another side that's really worthwhile. So if you're a customer-obsessed company, by telling brands that they can't elevate their pricing, brands will push back, and if you downgrade brands or remove them from the listings or penalize them, they will just get off of DoorDash. And so the argument that was being made in person was, well, if that's the case, then your customer is going to log into your app and they're used to ordering Chipotle, and Chipotle won't be there. And I think Chipotle is a bad example. So your local burrito company and your local burrito company won't be there. Well, then what do you do? And that's a bad consumer experience because you're going to have to go to another app and try to figure out where you can order from that company.
Yes.
And so they want to have as much choice for their consumers as possible. And by doing this, it's going to push restaurants off of the platform. Well, the other side of it is it's a terrible consumer experience when you know that burrito costs $10 in person and that it's now $13 on their app.
Or even more.
Or even more. And so I think that like everybody in the dynamic pricing world is, obviously picking their arguments very wisely. But when you talk about consumer choice is very important. And so is pricing sensitivity. And with a recession looming and with the amount of layoffs that have been happening, and I'm sure DoorDash has done the data mining on who their consumer exactly is, what's happened to their income, what's happened to their employment in general, and they're making some decisions. Now, that said, delivery is just not profitable when you have the margin profile of what a restaurant has today and the economics of what DoorDash and the fees are. And so it felt like I was waking up to a 2018 headline where like Google's AI wasn't spitting me the right article. And I was like, oh, this is a 5-year-old article. Let me reread it. But it was from last week or 2 weeks ago. So I was really surprised to see that. But how do they actually enforce it? I don't know. And do they actually want to enforce it if this is a merchant that's doing, top 10% volume on their platform? Is that a conversation you really want to have when you're making X amount of dollars from them? And so is it a headline where they're just trying to kind of make people be more thoughtful about what they're doing with pricing? I think that's the case. Versus, are they going to actually enforce it, kick people off, and truly penalize them? I think that's hard to do. And I think it'll be hard to manage, but it is ultimately a decision that I'm sure was made with a lot of thought and a lot of data behind it. And so it would be hard for me to sit here and contest it because they're very thoughtful and smart people there that run that organization. So we'll see. In terms of like DoorDash promoting sauce, and just to be clear, we have APIs that are supporting the two dynamic pricing companies in this industry, Juicer and Sauce, and we'll be completing integrations in the month of June itself to support them. So if, again, we want to give our brands choice. So if you want to explore dynamic pricing, we'll have the two players in the space right now that are doing it available through direct APIs to be able to pull your prices, change your prices, and all of that, obviously through consent. So we're excited for that, and I'm really excited for the space. And I think I think there are exceptional companies and individuals leading those companies that I'm rather close with. But I do think we need to be careful, and we need to kind of learn from what happened in hotels and OTAs. And we need to spend a lot of time thinking about pricing sensitivity and brand degradation, because brands have spent 30 years building their own brand. Restaurants have spent 30 years building a brand, and now in 5 years, they've implemented 10 new technologies, and that could put their brand to zero. And so we need to be thinking about the generational brand ownership. We need to be thinking about what truly is best for brand and consumer, and not just trying to push a new SaaS idea that's going to get me a 12x valuation for some sort of exit. And they're not going to be here in 10 years, right? They're going to all sell and be off cruising into the sunset, and the restaurant owners are still going to be here trying to figure out how to sell burritos. And so we need to make sure that whatever we're doing in this area is very thoughtful. So we'll see. I'm excited about it. I think that as we promote anything, we say, hey, put it at 5 stores and test it out. Yeah. Try the other competitor, put it on at 5 more stores, test them out. If you want it, cool. It's included in your package. We'll support it. It's all integrated via API, and you can try it out. But I think more brands should try it out. I think the concept that you just flatly increase a price 25% because it's a round number and it makes sense to you is a bad idea.
Because that's the commission that they're paying.
Yeah, but it's like understanding the true, I also have this feeling that brands don't actually spend a lot of time, specifically smaller brands. A lot of our big brands have some of the most brilliant people behind them and really robust organizations. And so they probably do this homework, but I think you actually probably don't know what the true price of your menu item should be. And so you can use dynamic pricing and a lot of this to do pricing discovery. I think everybody just thinks surge pricing, right? Because that's what's hit us. That rainy night in New York City where Uber's 4X what it actually is. And to go to West Village from Chelsea, it costs you $150. And so that's not what dynamic pricing is. There's lots of really good optionality there. And I would just say pricing discovery around what your true menu prices should be, but then also inflating and decreasing prices is a healthy habit for everybody.
I just personally for the industry, as a supporter of the industry and champion for restaurants, just hope that we don't see prices getting inflated plus more and more regulatory and service fees and all these line items to tack on, because you see people sharing these ridiculous screenshots of what it costs to get a sandwich from point A to point B, and you're just like, is this a joke? Like, how bad is inflation, and how bad is the current state of this hellscape of food delivery that we have to pay literally 4 times or something, 3 times or more, like the price of what this thing actually costs. Like at that time, you have to really do the calculus, like, and say, okay, is my time really that valuable? Unless you're like the CEO of Intercom posted this originally, that made everybody go crazy, right? Like the regulatory fee of Oakland on top of this thing. His time is probably pretty valuable, right? He's probably building chatbots for everything in his life. But for all of us, is that really going to work?
There's a lot of grifting happening. Local regulators getting their hands on fee caps and commissions. Who ultimately pays for that? Do we think DoorDash is going to eat those fees? No, it's going to get passed to the consumer.
They can't afford to.
They can't afford to, so it gets passed to the consumer. And so all these, walking around saying that they're supporting their local constituencies and all that stuff, it's actually just hurting their consumers. But there's no one in positions in a lot of these places to actually make the right decision and do the math. And so unfortunately what happens is they want to get reelected, so they pass this do good, feel good act of commission caps, and then that ends up smoking the restaurants, because if you're a chain or something, you can handle a little bit of a punch back to your volume. But if you're a local restaurant that's 40% reliant on DoorDash and Uber Eats volume in a specific market, and this type of cap happens, and then your volume goes down because it has to get passed to the consumer.
Yeah, exactly.
You're trying to figure out how you're paying for rent the next day.
Exactly.
And so it's a really important thing that I think bringing politicians in and bringing regulation in, sometimes artificial intelligence, things like that, it's a healthy idea. But bringing it in and fee caps and commission caps in these different metros where it's really just a ploy to get reelected and to pout your chest and sound like, you're doing the right thing when you actually don't care about restaurants and don't know what you're doing, I think is a really unhealthy.
Yeah, no, the nuance is lacking heavily in the narrative, and I'll just leave it at that, because, like you said, this isn't going away. It's becoming a huge chunk of restaurants' revenue, and we can throw pitchforks at DoorDash, Uber Eats, and Grubhub all day, but at the end of the day, they are providing a significant amount of volume in this space, and we need to be really thoughtful about the second order effects of all these different things. And very few politicians, they don't spend their time in the trenches, obviously, so they're not going to get it. So I get that. I want to transition over to talking about something that I'm noticing recently, and like Olo and Cloud Kitchens and a bunch of other companies that want to grow the TAM by a multiple. Let's say they double their TAM or something by essentially getting into the 4 walls of the restaurant. So Olo introduced Olo Pay. Cloud Kitchens is starting to get into the 4 walls of the restaurants with direct ordering through Otter. They also have a POS system. Ring the alarm. We'll be talking about this on Hungry Trends in the next few weeks. Do not worry. But what's going on here? Why are companies like Olo saying they need to be involved in a check at a restaurant when the butt is in the seat, not on the couch?
Well, I think that Olo's positioning here is actually quite sound fundamentally. It's that a majority of the transactions are still happening on premise in a restaurant. So there is a massive opportunity. It is true TAM expansion. And I think it's a healthy way to think about the business. Frankly, we're going after 4 walls as well. We have a kiosk product launching in Q3, and we have a really exciting scan order pay product. And I know that's very 2020, but turns out it's still a big opportunity. And so, the TAM is there. The orders are happening over the phone, through the drive-through, and in the restaurant. I think it's like Noah cited recently, like 6 or 7% of all transactions are digital transactions. So it's a massive opportunity outside of Uber Eats and DoorDash orders. And so you need to be, if you truly want to be a verticalized tech stack and a one-stop shop for brands, you should be addressing the other 90% of their ordering volume and have a comprehensive solution. And if you don't want to offer a solution yourself, have partners that can. And so I think it's a healthy idea. But where it ends up and, what Olo Pay ends up being is a white labeled version of Stripe, which didn't go well. And so they had to basically rip and replace the whole thing. And now it's a white label version of Adient. And we'll see if that ends up being the one that works. But turns out that brands just really like working with their own payment processing companies, and they want to use who they want to use. There's a ton of positive points to Olo Pay, I think, for brands, and they've seen some solid traction, but I don't think that they've seen anywhere near the adoption that they were guiding to Wall Street when they originally started talking about the product. And that's because what Toast is learning as well in the enterprise space. Sometimes you have to give up the payments revenue, at least in the near term, until your value prop is strong enough to take it back. And people have long, multi-decade relationships with their payment processors. They have rates that, although you can match it, they've been there with me through the dark times, through the positive times. They've connected them with banks and given them lines of credit. And so I think there's a lot deeper of what I'm starting to learn about, and we haven't really played in the payment space too much. So it's been a really fun few months for me getting my feet wet and hands dirty in this space and realizing how complex it really is. So I think that everybody getting into this space is doing it with the right idea, fiduciary towards their shareholders, but also providing a better experience for their customer. And I think we'll shake out in the same way where, the four walls is an important place to be. And that tech needs to get leveled up as well, as much as the takeout tech needed to get leveled up. I think what happens and what sits inside of the four walls of a restaurant is going to look very different 5 years from now than it does today. We're already starting to see it. I mean, how many times did your credit card get taken to the back and disappeared? You go to Europe, you go to Asia, they bring it out to the table and swipe it. Here we are in 2022, finally transitioned last year to pay at table with the handheld devices from Toast that they innovated with. And now Square has a great handheld device. And so we'll see ultimately what happens. But I think the four walls need some upgrades and some facelifts happening. And I think it's a healthy idea. But are you going to win the payments revenue? And I think you should be very conservative on what you're guiding the people that your penetration is going to be on products like that, because it's an uphill battle.
Yeah, everybody wants to take their 50 bips, as many people say in this industry. It's all about, can we capture as many transactions as possible, the biggest TAM as possible, and then multiply that by 50 basis points, and that's just gravy on top. But it doesn't work like that.
And what Visa, MasterCard, and Amex get away with in this country is outrageous. I mean, I think it's like 2 to 3x what they get away with in Europe. The interchange rates and all of that stuff, it's like 75 bips versus 225. So you got to imagine over time those rates come down quite substantially as well. So I don't know. We'll see. Not a payments expert by any means. Interested in learning the space a lot. And we'll see. But I don't think it's a bad idea to try to go after the four walls. I think it's a sound strategy. Now, execution is a different story.
Yeah. We haven't seen DoorDash really announce much after the Bbot acquisition from what I've seen. That was the whole story to shareholders, and yet we're still chasing new verticals like, I don't know, pet food, et cetera, et cetera.
There's a whole list of incredible exits that happen in this industry that all you can do is just kind of smile and take your hat off to the people that managed them, because the multiples on the Bbot exit, the multiples on I think it was Ovation going to Olo, and that business will add how much value? Unsure. I think 2-3 years later. So, there's lots of really good deals that happened for founders and teams in 19 and 20 when the markets were really frothy, and it was amazing to see. And I think good for everybody. Maybe not the acquirer, but good for everybody. But Bbot had a lot of really good tech. So would we ever have seen it? Not sure. And they tend to be pretty close to the vest on what they do at DoorDash. So TBD. Doesn't mean that any of these weren't actually worth something, but
totally. So while I have you here, I got to ask you about ghost kitchens, because you have an interesting vantage point working with some of the top brands, and kind of being the piping for this industry. What's your thought on like adoption? I mean, obviously Wendy's had the reef kitchens, and now I think in this quarter they're going to completely get rid of all of them. They're going to finish turning them off. You know, are you seeing them light up, slow down? Where are we at in this evolution, and where does it go?
Yeah, I would say we've seen a deceleration in interest, but still searching for the right business model. I would say that brands in general are not done with the concept. The first idea is never the one that ends up sticking anyway. And so I would say there's lots of iteration happening. There's lots of A/B testing. And I think now we're probably on D, G, E, and F testing, but lots of testing happening. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. It's unfortunately a buzzword that I hope gets rebranded. Maybe someone in this industry can rebrand it, because it's kind of become the crypto. It was sold to SMBs. The whole pitch here was that SMBs are going to be able to take their kitchen that has 40 to 60% utility and take that excess capacity and sling out cheesesteaks and burgers for Mr. Beast, and they were going to make boatloads of money.
Well, that's virtual brands.
Right. And so that's where this all started, was that whole concept. And then we started talking about the actual real estate print and ghost kitchens. And I think what's happened on both sides is that not much has come to fruition. And so there's some that are doing really well. These super large brands of ours are doing very well, exceptionally well.
You're talking about brick and mortar brands, or like pure digital?
Brick and mortar brands that are then creating ghost concepts.
Okay. Secondary, tertiary.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's interesting. SMB is pretty much a nothing in this category in my mind. I think it's going to be really hard for SMBs to execute because of the team and bandwidth that it takes.
Yeah.
Existing brands building out new, this wasn't your question. Existing brands building out new concepts and stuff like that. Interesting. Now you're talking like Kitchen United, Cloud Kitchen, stuff like that. I don't know enough to have an opinion here, other than, I think what's very clear is that Cloud Kitchens is teetering a very fine line of kind of moral hazard, and you start to see more and more of that over the last year as things play out. And, some have said that Otter is kind of behaving like the Trojan horse in the restaurant industry, where salespeople were getting paid $100 bounties to go collect usernames and passwords for logins to different ordering platform apps. And so they would get like $100, and then they would turn around and they say, "Why am I getting paid $100? This customer's not paying us anything." And they would say, "Don't worry about it. Just keep dialing and collecting usernames and passwords." And so they would set them up with a freemium dashboard, and that would kind of pull their Uber Eats and DoorDash and Grubhub information together in a dashboard, and it would tell you how many orders you did in aggregate versus having to log into each one. But in reality, what was happening is that data is, if you think that data is siloed and there's a Chinese wall there, then I think you're crazy. No. And what they were doing is, and this was very specific strike missions from what I've been told, is that they would want to open a kitchen in, let's just say, Pasadena.
Yeah.
They would send.
They have one there.
Yeah, I might have just said that by accident. They would send 30 to 50 Otter sales reps out there and try to sign up every brand in the country, and they would sell some integration product, undercut us. They'd be selling it for $20 a month. Now we know what it costs to operate our business.
Yeah.
How could you possibly sell for $20 a month to an SMB when I sell for $100?
Yeah.
I didn't just charge $100 because I wanted a round number. It's what makes sense for our business. But it turns out when there's a data play there, and then you have a bunch of reps collecting usernames and passwords and login information and scraping those portals, you can see it's the Amazon Basics model all over again, right? You can see what sells at what prices during what time of the day in what locations.
Yeah.
You then, because your Cloud Kitchens, have the ability to buy it cheaper, sell it cheaper, and distribute better. And so what that does is that disintermediates the local mom and pop restaurants and ultimately puts them in a very difficult place financially.
Yeah.
And so Travis is obviously a master executor when it comes to operations, and one of the 0 to 1 people that exist in this world today. So, kudos to the concept.
Yeah.
But it's a really, it's a really bad thing to be involved in. And, I speak very frequently with lots of our partners about this and, we also integrate with Otter. And it's like, this will come out. This will be a front page of Wall Street Journal or front page of TechCrunch or wherever. Because it's really bad practice. And this isn't just speculation. This is pretty much understood at this space. There's enough people that have left those companies, which again, are still to this day a stealth company 4 years later. And
no, it's 7 years.
And when you sign NDAs, it's like basically you're signing your life away to go work at these places. So everybody has to speak in conditions of anonymity.
Correct.
But everybody's talking about what's going on. It's not a secret anymore. And I speak about it very frequently, whether it's at conferences or, this isn't shaming a competitor. I would compete with Chowly and Olo and Ordermark and DeliverEct and have nothing but good things to say about the businesses and how they're operating. And if I have something to say, we talk about it very clearly and we speak together all the time. Rising tide, all boats is good. This is a good industry. There's a lot of good people that care, but when you see what's actually happening here with the data mining and the privacy issues, it's a real concern. And, I think we'll continue to see the large DSPs push back on security updates and permissions starting to block. But be careful with your data and be careful who you're signing up to something free and shiny as a dashboard. It takes a UI UX developer 3 days to whip up a dashboard that can make you smile and say this is great, but what's actually happening there is kind of the biggest concern. So there's a lot of that happening, and I think it's it's set up to cause a lot of trouble in the SMB space, particular.
Wow. Well, thank you for sounding the alarm in case of those who didn't already know. I actually didn't know that they were stealing, like that there was a privacy violation, but that makes awful sense because I see everything that they do, including the Digital Restaurant Association, which I just put out an article about, that whole lobbying effort. There's a greater motive here. They are saying we're going to basically suck all the margin out of your business, marketplaces, everything. And guess what? We'll collect it all back through our real estate portfolio. We'll essentially, collect that in the form of rent, whatever the value, whatever the value that they can suck out of making this a vertically integrated stack will flow back to them in the form of a, discounted cash flow at whatever the cap rate du jour is of, commercial real estate and what those investors are willing to pay. And it's going to be that will be valued a lot greater than a company like DoorDash, than a company like Uber Eats. Shell company.
And to be clear, Matt, just on the record, because I know their legal team will be in touch with me probably an hour after they hear this, but I did not say that they're stealing it or doing anything with it. This is all speculation about what has been heard and discussed amongst ex-employees and industry people. And so I have not actually physically seen myself them stealing data and doing anything with it. But this is the narrative that's going around the industry, and I think it's worth discussing, and I wouldn't bring it up on a platform like yours unless it had some credence behind it.
I appreciate that honesty, and it doesn't surprise me. As we come kind of towards the end, would love to just, get your take on where delivery trends over the next 5 to 10 years. So just a few data points, like I said, Domino's and Chipotle are reporting that delivery sales are slowing, and they're pushing more, Domino's especially is pushing more customers towards carry out. So let's talk, do you have any thoughts on that trend? And then just any broader 5 to 10 year outlooks, winners and losers, not rapid fire response, but I threw a lot at you, but at high level would be amazing.
I'll keep it quick. I think DoorDash had a really positive quarter, and so did Uber, though. So although CPGs are saying, sorry, not CPGs, QSRs are saying, I was thinking CMG because of Chipotle. QSRs are saying that they're seeing a little bit of a deceleration. I think DoorDash reported that gross ticket size was up 30% and restaurant transactions were up like 25%. So I don't know, are people pivoting from QSR back to some local heroes, maybe
Sure.
had a little bit too much of, the same few brands for a while that were getting pushed to the top on these apps. And I don't know, because I couldn't really parse through the data quick enough because it just came out last week to figure out what's happening. But I don't know. Positive signs from DoorDash and Uber, not so positive from some brands. My guess is the pendulum is swung. Consumer behavior has changed indefinitely. I mean, when my 70-year-old parents are ordering from Grubhub and DoorDash, the time has come. We are here. These business models are great. They're convenient. I'm a big user of the apps myself, and I live in Los Angeles surrounded by amazing restaurants. And so I would say there's more of it. First party is going to continue to evolve and become a real player in this space, but third party, using Google to sell more socks analogy is always going to be a relevant idea. And there'll be another platform that pops up and tries to be the next best thing. And there's going to be another demand gen platform, and you'll order food from TikTok, and you'll order food from Snapchat, and you'll order food from all these different platforms that you're engaged in. There's going to be ordering via text message. There's going to be AI ordering and chatbots and all that stuff, GPT-3 powered, blah, 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 right? It's all coming. There's going to be more ways to order than there ever has been. And so sure, that might take a little bit of market share from one of the big DSPs because there's just only so much market share to have. But they've proven that they can continue to, you can double dash now, and you can add on 7-Eleven on your way, and you can get a case of milk and some eggs. And so their driver times are getting faster. Their loyalty programs are super sticky. I mean, that's why my credit card and DSP loyalty program is sticky, and I love it and not going anywhere. So, I think that it's going to be a fun industry. Things will continue to evolve, and it's going to be exciting to see what happens. I think restaurants will have 10 ordering channels, not 3. Yeah. And that's going to allow them to have a little bit more price control. And that's going to allow them to kind of dictate where their customers order from, flyers and bags, all that type of old school stuff, but incentivize people. If your text message order channel is 5% per order and your DSP channel is 20% per order, well, then give them 10% off by ordering direct. Right. You're net 5 positive, and it's great. So I think restaurants have really evolved a ton in the last 5 years, and there's probably a ton more evolution to happen. I think it's positive for everybody. What happens to restaurant tech companies, who knows? I'm terrible at this type of stuff, but I think, like I said in the beginning, there's more roll-ups. Toast has a really big opportunity here to step in and, acquire 2 to 3 companies in the next few years. I would imagine that Sevneet and the team over at PAR are going to probably continue to lean on the M&A strategy. They've already made, I think he's made maybe 4 or 5 acquisitions since he's stepped in. Right. I think you'll continue to see it, right? Shift 4 has rolled up how many? 6 POSs now. They just acquired Focus 2 weeks ago. So roll-ups here, it's going to continue by the POS. Olo's probably going to have issues with growth, and so they'll have to try to figure out how to do another acquisition as well, right? And so that's just going to continue to be the public nature of this. It's great to be a private company sitting with all these public companies that are going to have to worry about comps, and they're going to need to buy some company, and that'll be a great place for all of us that are doing something interesting and building a profitable, sustainable business. But ultimately, we'll see what happens. It's a fun time to be building, and I think there's probably like 10 other ideas I have if I had the time to just go out and build in this industry. It's like not like anything close to being solved. There's so much opportunity out here. There's so many more demand gen channels. There's so much more tech that the restaurants need, but it needs to be done thoughtfully. And so that's why I think it's a really exciting time. We're seeing no shortage of really smart entrepreneurs getting into this space and starting really exciting ideas. So more of that.
Amazing insights. Really, really wonderful. Thank you for sharing them. If people want to find you online, on LinkedIn, or if people want to learn more about Checkmate, I'll give you a few seconds to plug away. I'm on LinkedIn, not very active on LinkedIn. My MySpace hasn't worked in a few years. And other than that, it's Stefan Hertzberg on LinkedIn, and check out ItsaCheckmate.com. And you can always shoot me an email or call or text. I think all my contact information is up there. So happy to chat, and looking forward to meeting more people. Okay,
Thanks for
awesome.
having me, man. Really appreciate it and love what you guys are doing for the industry. So keep going.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you hear, please hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. And if you're curious to get a firsthand look at the cutting edge of food and tech, check out hungry.tv. That's Hungry with no U, where you can join in on live conversations like these or sign up for the free weekly newsletter.